So the second and final presidential debate is in the books, and it was actually a pretty good one. It was much better than I was expecting, actually, and it was definitely the more substantive debate. I was worried about the whole issue of cutting the mics off, but it really didn't seem to be too much of an issue, though there were a couple times when it sounded like Trump's mic cut out, but it was really just for a brief second or two. So the format of this debate was actually much better and allowed both candidates to actually elicit their responses, which was really good to see instead of both people stepping over. It may not have been quite as entertaining as the first one, but it did allow us to get much better responses from each candidate. Kristen Welker, she did actually a much better job than I was expecting. I still think that she tried to avoid foreign policy and the economy as much as possible, but she didn't go, she didn't cross the line too much in trying to prevent those topics from coming up. So she didn't entirely run away from the issues of Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's corruption. She also certainly didn't run towards them either. She did step on Trump quite a bit, so there was a lot of times when Trump was talking and she would try to cut in and end his time. Now, some of the times I felt like she was cutting in a little bit early, like when Trump's time wasn't up, and she didn't seem to step on Joe Biden once. But part of that might actually be, I wasn't really keeping a clock or anything, so part of it might be that Trump actually had more to say and would run up all the way to the end of his time, and he would just keep going and going and going if he was allowed, whereas Joe Biden never really seemed to have a whole lot to say, and he would talk in circles with the predictable, tired, and dishonest lines that we really all expected out of him, and he would just kind of talk a few minutes or for a little bit and then run out of steam. And there was another time where he said something about like, oh yeah, it just randomly, he's like, oh, you look anxious over there, haha, gave a nervous laugh, and it was kind of weird. It was probably the most bizarre moment of the night. But somebody in the Biden campaign really needs to get that man a body language coach. I mean, the dude just looked tired, weak, and limp up there. And he kept his head down. Whenever he wasn't talking, he had his head down like this. And it just made him look weak. It made him look bowed. So it was like he was bowing to Trump. So it was not particularly good. And my suspicion is that it may be because he was hurriedly trying to memorize his talking points before his dementia-addled mind forgot where he was, because we've seen him forget what state he is in a number of times. I will admit I was a little disappointed that while he did fumble and bumble as Joe Biden does, he didn't really have any major flubs that would really totally sink him. He didn't have any major WTF moments where you were just like, whoa, this guy will never be able to hold his own. But he did stutter and stammer and, like I said, fumble and bumble quite a bit. And my guess is that he was probably... I think he was just geeked to the gills on Adderall. Because, I mean, his pupils were bigger than... bigger than a school for giants. I mean, it was ridiculous. Again, and this was the same, I pointed this out last time, I think. Maybe I didn't point it out, but I at least noticed it in the first debate. His eyes were just black. It's really, really weird, Joe Biden's eyes. And I think what it is that his pupils are just completely dilated. He did have a few moments where his senility did shine through, like when he called the Proud Boys the poor boys, which was funny. And I'm not sure that his Abraham Lincoln here is the most racist president in American history line really landed. I mean, for one, the whole racist charge in general has gone limper than Hunter Biden after a weekend Coke binge. It's so tired and it's so played out. And at this point, we've seen so much support from Trump from minority communities that it just has lost all effect. And speaking of binges, we do need to take a moment of silence for all the fools out there who centered their debate night drinking games around Joe Biden's nervous laughter. And I mean, every single time Donald Trump said something, he was hanging his head and laughing nervously. And that's another reason why I think Joe Biden was thwacked out on uppers. He had this kind of tweaky coat grin, that where you try to smile, but like only one side of your face gets the message. It was really weird. But there's really no question about who on the debate stage was a sleazy, out-of-touch politician and who actually understands the American people. Biden came to this debate just preloaded with canned cheese and cringy pun-liners. Like, they were talking about the coronavirus, and he said something along the lines of, what was it? Trump says we're learning to live with it. We're learning to die with it. Oh, come on. Come on. Take that canned ham and do not open it in this room. It was really, really cringy. Or when he said, I'm not going to shut down the virus, or no, what did he say? I'm going to shut down the virus, not the country. I mean, all these, like, these politician lines, they were straight up things that you'd see in, like, movies where politicians say things that they think are going to have impact, but at this point, Joe Biden just cannot stand on a stage with Donald Trump and be the alpha. So when you try to throw those limp-wristed little one-liners out there, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And of course, he provided no clear plan of action for how he was going to do any of that. As always, he just spoke in these vague and undefined terms. And, you know, I was actually a little surprised that Trump did a pretty good job on defending his effort on the coronavirus. Again, he called out Joe for when Joe called him xenophobic for shutting down travel to China. But overall, he did a really good job of backing up what he did and then also calling out the Democrat governors. And Joe Biden tried to run the line of, well, I don't see it as red states and blue states, and tried to make it sound like Trump was being divisive by calling out Democrats. But anybody with two brain cells to rub together, they understand the political climate right now. They understand how bifurcated the Democrats and the Republicans are and how big the divide, how big the chasm is. So there was another time where he said, oh, I'm going to be an American president. But it's like, you don't, that just went to even further show that he doesn't understand the divide between the American people. Because we're at this place now where you cannot represent both sides at once. Hell, even within the Democrat Party, you can't even represent the Blue Dog Democrats and the Progressive Democrats at once. Even in the Democratic Party, you can't even represent your entire party at once. How are you going to include the entire country and how you're going to represent them? Because we have such ideological divisions in this country right now, and Biden does not seem to understand this at all. And so back to when Trump actually called him out for calling him xenophobic for shutting down travel to China, Joe Biden, of course, denied that he ever did that, and he said that he's taking it out of context. But it was kind of funny because it seems like, yeah, it seems like you could take a mashup of this debate and other Joe Biden moments from the past and create this whole Joe Biden versus Joe Biden debate of its own. And maybe I'll do that if I have time. Maybe that might be a fun little side project to do. All the times where Joe Biden said things at the debate that completely contradicted things that he said before. Things like with fracking. He once again claimed that he wouldn't get rid of fracking, but he and Kamala Harris have both clearly said that if they were in power, they were going to get rid of fracking. I think he even said he was going to get rid of coal mine, all the coal miners were going to be out of work and things like that. But the biggest lie of all that is really going to come back to bite Joe Biden is when he emphatically swore that Hunter Biden did nothing wrong and that he's never taken any money from a foreign country. Never taken any money at all whatsoever from a foreign country. And, when you're standing there with a smoking gun in your hand, it's probably not the best idea to emphatically swear that you've never touched a gun in your life. Because we have outright proof of Joe Biden being involved. We have text messages from his son talking about calling him his chairman and the big guy. And then we've seen that phrasing. I was going to say phraseology. I'm like, that's not a word. That phrasing used in Hunter Biden's emails. So it was clearly an instance where Joe Biden knows that the media is just going to try to shield him from this. And he just was pushing in all the chips on their ability to do so, which not a smart move. But at this point, we all know that Joe Biden's age has surpassed his IQ. He's not a very smart guy. I mean, at one point, Joe Biden even tried to allude to the idea that Trump might be colluding with the Iranians on election interference. The Iranians. You mean the guy who ended the insane Iran deal that Obama and Joe Biden put in place to ship them $150 billion, that's the one that's colluding with Iranians? I don't think so. I don't think so one bit. He also claimed that in dealing with North Korea, that he would solve the problem by telling them that they have to be part of the deal. Basically his answer to North Korea was, well, I'm going to tell them they got to be part of the deal. They got to get on board. What a weak approach. Now, I'm not sure what that even means. Tell them to get up, telling them to be part of the deal, or how he's going to get a despotic hermit country to be part of the deal. If it was that easy, why the hell didn't he do that when he was VP for 8 years? And Trump did do a really good job of hammering home how long Joe Biden has been in office and gotten nothing done. And Joe Biden really showed that he is just too old for this game, and he is entirely out of touch with the American people. He is still operating as a politician from years past. He doesn't seem to understand that Trump has come in and completely changed the game of politics. And we're seeing that trickle down with some of the younger Republicans in the Senate and the House of Representatives. People like Dan Crenshaw, people like Josh Hawley. There's a new breed of Republican young politicians. Now, I know Trump isn't young, but he has opened the door for these kinds of people to come in and start brushing away the old establishment. And Joe Biden represents that old establishment. He is the figurehead. Maybe he's the VP figurehead of that establishment. Hillary Clinton is the head of that establishment. I mean, she is the face of it. But Joe Biden is right there with him, or with her. Whatever Hillary Clinton is. That demonic succubus. Now, Trump, on the other hand, he really held his own and impressed throughout the entire debate. He was well-spoken, he got his point across, and he had strong, direct answers for everything thrown his way. He even had a few high-five moments, and by that I mean there were a few moments when me and my buddy who I was watching it with, we turned to each other and high-fived at a couple of things Trump said, but hey, we're kind of corny ourselves. But, just certain times where Trump just hit the nail on the head, and it was funny. So, he also wasn't overly abrasive, and I was kind of surprised. He actually complimented Kristen Welker at one point for how she was moderating the debate. Now, again, Kristen Welker wasn't spectacular. She did step on Trump's toes quite a bit, but it was a lot better than expected. Trump was also quick to point out the Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe's assessment that both Russian and Iranian interference efforts were efforts to undermine Trump's candidacy, not Biden's. And so for all the efforts of Biden and, of course, all the Biden cronies, the James Clapper, John Brennan, the media, all those people who are saying that this entire Hunter Biden email thing is Russian disinformation, he did a good job of putting a pin in that, and really revealing, if you're able to connect those dots, you're able to realize that this Russian collusion thing is a complete and utter fabrication at this point, and it's so desperate. It's a game that they played for 3 years, lost, and they're still sitting there at the checkers board trying to move pieces around when Trump's already gone off and eaten lunch after winning every game at the table. It's it's really funny how desperate they are, and it really makes you think that they're hanging on by just a thread. And so, of course, Joe Biden picked up the media football, though, and tried to claim, the whole Russian disinformation thing that all of his other cronies are saying. And Trump hilariously responded, "Oh, is this going to be another Russia hoax?" And he really tore into them with that. And I think the audience watching, they're so sick of hearing about Russia that to hear him just so frivolously mock the idea that Russia is behind all this, I think that Trump just won them over. The independents that are watching, that are tired of this Russia thing. When he said that, it really put a mirror up to Joe Biden and showed him how silly he looks by continuing this Russian game that we know they fabricated, that we know was a Hillary Clinton device to undermine Trump's presidency, and really held that mirror up and showed who he is. So I thought that was pretty good. And when Joe Biden tried to ham it up over the whole kids in cages thing, Trump was pretty quick to snap back and ask, well, who built the cages? And he referenced the 2014 photos that the media tried to pass off as happening under Donald Trump's watch. He also made some pretty salient points that a lot of the kids were trafficked by coyotes, and this was really kind of a pivotal moment for, I mean, I don't want to say it was a pivotal moment for me in the debate because there was no pivotal moment. I'm already fully in the bag for Trump. Joe Biden had no chance of winning my vote. But I do think that there are going to be people who see Biden's response that, when Trump said that these kids were brought over by coyotes and Biden groaned and said, they weren't brought over by coyotes, they were brought over by their parents. I think a lot of people are going to look at that and see that it really, really made Joe Biden look bad, because it was either an outright denial that any of these kids could have been brought over by cartel coyotes, and it made him look excessively naive, or that he doesn't realize that cartel coyotes entirely control the southern border, and that if you're going to be that easily taken advantage of by drug cartels, if you're going to give drug cartels and human traffickers the benefit of the doubt that none of these that they had nothing to do with any of these kids coming across the border, how easily is this man going to be taken advantage of by bad people on the world stage? If you can't even realize that there are evil cartel activities and human trafficking operations going on at your own southern border, what are you going to do when you're sitting across the table from Xi Jinping, who, if you watch my episode, my video that I put out earlier, you're going to realize that he's likely been basically a compadre of Xi Jinping for decades now. But at the end of the day, there's really no rational person that could watch this debate and think that Joe Biden won. I mean, even my buddy's girlfriend, who doesn't like Trump at all, had to admit that Trump just absolutely mopped the floor with Joe Biden on this one. I mean, the whole time, Joe Biden looked weak. He looked slumped over, his head down, the nervous laughter, the nervous smiles, the canned, sleazy politician, corny one-liners, all the obvious lies, all the obvious contradictions, all the cloying emotional appeals that just don't affect people the way that he thinks they do. Most people can tell when you're trying to emotionally manipulate them, and Biden did that numerous times. Like when he was sitting there talking about, what was he, I forget what he was asked about. I think he was asked something about, it might have even been about North Korea, and he was talking about, you're sitting at the family, you're sitting around the table with the family, and this and that, and it was just kind of like, dude, what are you talking about right now? What are you even talking about? So, but at the end of the day, I think the biggest thing that we have to watch for is how Joe Biden handles it when the media is no longer able to cover up his egregious dealings with foreign governments and all the millions and millions of dollars that the Biden family has made by selling out Joe Biden's position of power and his influence. I think it's going to be I think he just set himself up for a major fall by going all in on the just abject lie and then trusting that the media is going to carry water for him, because he sat there and swore up and down, I have never taken a dollar from a foreign country. But man, like, we got the proof already. It's out. You really think the media is going to be able to shield you from this? I mean, maybe he just realized that if people come to accept it, he's dead in the water anyways, which he is. So, I don't know. But either way, Trump won this debate very, very handily. So, anyways, that's my assessment on last night's debate. So, if you liked this, if you liked my my thoughts on it, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Share this video. Hit that notification bell, because we all know it's voices like mine that are first to be taken out back and old yellered by the folks at Big Tech. Speaking of Big Tech, if you want to follow me on there, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Also on some alt-tech sites on Parler, Minds, and Pilled.net. All of them at Ram Thorburn. Also, I'm on some alternative video sites, so if I ever do get kicked off of YouTube, you can find me on BitChute and Rumble, also at Ram Thorburn. And if you would like to contribute to the channel, there are links to my Subscribe Star, Patreon, and PayPal down in the description below. And as always, rev your engines, ride hard, and fight like hell.
Never tell them who I am.